shutting down economic engines to deal with the COVID-19 health crisis, and restarting again as infection rates come under control. As virus hit places open up for business again, they need to grapple with the when. Restart too fast, and they risk raising infection numbers. Drag too long, and they risk further economic fallout.
If you look at earlier pandemics like the Spanish flu, it came in waves. There were, second and third waves. And in the case of the Spanish flu, the second wave was worse. At the same time, we have to recognize we cannot lock down forever. We do want a sense of normalcy back. And the longer we spend in a lockdown, the more likely it is that firm worker relations break, supply chains go down, firms go into bankruptcy, consumers start cutting back on spending.
In Southeast Asia, Singapore and Malaysia are among countries that are rebooting their economies. Malaysia's movement control order was partially lifted on May the 4th, 6 weeks after it was imposed on March the 18th. The country's Prime Minister has warned of economic losses of around 63 billion ringgit, or $14 billion from the closure. Singapore will start to come out of its circuit breaker in phases from next week. 2020 growth figures have been cut for a third time. Expectations are now for a contraction of between 4 and 7%.
Singapore has decided to adopt a lot more of a cautious phase-in approach. I think when you look at the relaxation in Malaysia and Thailand, it was a lot faster. For example, retail malls are starting to open with, of course, the social distance rules in place. Restaurants are allowed to have in-dining, but perhaps kept at half capacity, as in some US cities as well.
Consumer-facing sectors like retail and food and beverage have been among the hardest hit. The F&B industry in Singapore has seen a steep drop in revenues from dine-in customers. With dining in banned during the circuit breaker, delivery has become a must-have for F&B players to be profitable and remain sustainable.
Delivery has seen strong growth during the circuit breaker period. However, F&B operators recognize that high costs come with this convenience, which is likely to stay and likely to grow. A couple of key aspects to be considered. Food needs to be designed for the delivery platform so that the customer experience is retained. Certain dishes do not hold well over time.
F&B players here won't be able to open for dine-in yet when Phase 1 of the post-circuit breaker period kicks in. But the industry is gearing up to open to a different customer clientele in Phase 2.
We expect safe distancing to remain for a foreseeable time. This will affect the conventional revenue model. Seating capacity will be reduced in just about every outlet. One way that perhaps we could compensate for this lower capacity would be suggest that we might have longer lunch hours. Your typical lunchtime normally took place, say, between noon and 2 p.m. So the question is whether we can shift consumer behavior and have lunch hour between 11 and 3 p.m. And then we have a similar concept for a similar approach to dinner.
The Restaurant Association of Singapore is also looking at ways to redesign the conventional restaurant layout.
A barrier concept which would also provide the similar safety to a distance concept. This would be essentially creating barriers or dividers between diners or groups of diners. Some of these concepts have been piloted in other countries that have emerged from lockdown.
Like F&B, it won't be business as usual for companies in all other sectors. The survivors will be those who are agile and able to adapt with new business models.
They have to build some resilience in the supply chains because, if the supply chains are scattered and there's a shock in some other country where cases spike, this will have an impact on their production processes. They have to think about what channels with which they are going to actually sell? Can they move away from the face-to-face channels more towards online and digital channels?
As the economy, its companies and people make this transition to a new normal, they will need some support.
The stimulus has to be now more targeted. It has to be targeted towards enterprises which are really hurting. SMEs would be a good example. It has to be targeted towards workers who are going to get laid off. It's also useful in terms of reviving the economies to sort of not give up. The big mistake that many countries made during the global financial crisis was that they turned to austerity very quickly.
Malaysia has unveiled 3 economic stimulus packages worth $63 billion. And Singapore this week unleashed its 4th package of support measures. In all, the city-state will spend about 93 billion Singapore dollars or $65.5 billion. The amount includes 52 billion Sing or $36.6 billion from reserves.
Singapore has and is willing to use up, some of its reserves to help spread out this phasing in of the recovery. It won't stop the economy from going to recession. It won't stop some firms from still slipping into bankruptcy, and it won't stop some from losing their jobs. I think we have to recognize that there are also structural changes that will happen because of this pandemic. Some jobs may be lost forever. Some jobs may not come back for 2 to 3 years.
COVID-19 is not going to disappear, at least until a vaccine has been found. There will be potential second waves or even third waves. And countries exiting lockdown will have to be prepared to go back into shutdown mode if those infection rates go up.